My family didn't appreciate me, but when I found out who my wife was pregnant with, I was shocked. All right, Reddit, buckle up, because this one's a mess. 29 million, was never my parents' favorite. That title belonged to my younger brother, Jake, 27 million. You know the type: charming, effortlessly likable, the golden child who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was just there. I wasn't rebellious or troubled. I just never got the same attention. Growing up, Jake got everything handed to him. If he wanted a car, my parents got him one. If I needed help with college, loans exist for a reason, they said. When Jake got in trouble at school, it was always just boys being boys. When I so much as forgot to take out the trash, I was lazy and ungrateful. It wasn't outright cruelty. It was just clear that, in their eyes, Jake mattered more. I learned to stop expecting fairness. Instead of fighting for scraps of their affection, I focused on myself. I worked my ass off, got into a good university, and built a solid career in finance. I made something of myself, not because of my family's support, but despite their lack of it. Then I met Emily, 27F. She was everything I wanted: smart, kind, funny. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had something Jake didn't. Something just for me. She and Jake got along well, but I didn't think much of it. Jake was charming with everyone. It was just his nature. Emily and I got married, and for the first time, I felt like I had truly escaped Jake's shadow. I had built my own life, away from the favoritism, away from the golden child dynamic, or so I thought. A year into our marriage, Emily got pregnant. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. I was going to be a father. We were starting a family of our own. Finally, I thought, this is it. This is the life I always wanted. But then, Jake started showing up more. At first, I didn't think much of it. He'd always been friendly with Emily, and they got along. But now, he was around constantly, always checking in on her, texting her, offering to help with errands. He cracked jokes about how he'd be the cool uncle and how our kid was going to love him more than me. It was weird, but Jake had always been a little self-absorbed, so I just shrugged it off. Until I started noticing the way Emily looked at him. It wasn't just friendly. It wasn't just casual. It was different. I told myself I was imagining things. She was my wife. She loved me. We were about to have a baby. But then I saw the texts, and my entire world came crashing down. You ever have a moment where your gut tells you something is off, but you ignore it because you don't want to believe it? Yeah, that was me. I told myself I was imagining things. Jake was my brother. Emily was my wife. There was no way they'd ever, right? But the signs kept piling up. Emily started acting different. She was more distant, less affectionate. She'd always been the type to greet me at the door after work, ask about my day, cuddle up to me on the couch. But lately, she was distracted, constantly checking her phone, smiling at messages she wouldn't let me see. And then there were the lies, small, stupid lies that didn't even make sense. Oh, I was just out shopping. We ran into each other by accident. Jake was just helping me pick out baby stuff. Little things. Things I probably wouldn't have noticed if they didn't happen all the time. But the moment that really made me pause? One night, Emily was asleep, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't even look. I trusted my wife. But this time, I did. It was a text from Jake. Jake, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place? Emily, of course, love you. I swear, I felt my heart stop. Love you? At first I thought, maybe it's just friendly. I mean, people say love you platonically, right? But something inside me, that gut feeling I'd been ignoring, screamed at me to check further. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I picked up Emily's phone and scrolled up. And that's when I found everything. Months of messages, late night confessions, talks about sneaking around, about how they couldn't wait to be together, about how Jake wanted the baby to have his last name. And then the one that broke me completely. Jake. Are you going to tell him? Emily. Number. Not until after the baby's born. It'll be easier that way. I put the phone down. My hands were shaking. My entire life had just been flipped upside down. I looked over at Emily, sleeping peacefully next to me, while I sat there realizing that nothing in my life was real. My wife, my marriage, my future child. None of it belonged to me. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I was going to burn it all to the ground. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I just found out that my wife, the woman I built a life with, was having an affair with my own brother. And worse, they were planning to trap me into raising his child. By morning, I wasn't even sad anymore. I was furious. Emily woke up like nothing was wrong, stretching and yawning, completely oblivious to the storm coming her way. Morning, she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. Did you sleep okay? I stared at her. How could she be so normal? How could she act like everything was fine while she was sneaking around with Jake behind my back? I took a deep breath and said, Who's the father? Emily froze. That was all the confirmation I needed. What? She whispered, but her face went pale. I didn't even blink. Who's the father of this baby? Emily? I repeated, my voice cold. She stammered, shaking her head, trying to play dumb. What are you talking about? I grabbed my phone and pulled up the screenshots. Every disgusting message. Every lie. Every plan they had to tell me after the baby was born, when it would be too late for me to walk away. Emily's eyes widened in horror. Oh my God. You went through my phone? That was what she cared about? That I went through her phone? I laughed. An ugly, bitter laugh. Yeah, I did. And you know what I found? The truth. I held the phone up. So, I'll ask you one more time, Emily. Who is the father? Her mouth opened and closed, her eyes darting around like she was looking for an escape. And then, she started crying. Not the guilty kind of crying, the manipulative kind. I didn't mean for this to happen, she sobbed. I love you. I swear. It was a mistake. I clenched my jaw. A mistake? You were together for a year. This isn't a mistake, Emily. This is a full-on betrayal. She reached for me, but I stepped back. I didn't want her anywhere near me. I was going to tell you, she whispered. No, you weren't, I shot back. You were going to let me raise Jake's kid. You were going to let me think I was a father while you laughed behind my back with my own damn brother. That's when she finally dropped the act. The tears stopped instantly. Her expression hardened, and she glared at me. You would have been a better father than him anyway, she snapped. And that was it. I exhaled slowly and nodded. Thanks for making this easy, then. I grabbed my keys, turned toward the door, and before she could say another word, I threw over my shoulder. We're done, Emily. I'm filing for divorce. Then I walked out. And the moment I stepped outside, I called Jake. Time to destroy him too. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My whole life had just fallen apart, and there was one more person who needed to face the consequences. Jake. Pulling out my phone, I called him. He picked up on the second ring, his voice light, almost cheerful. He had no idea what was coming. Yo, big bro, what's up? I didn't bother with small talk. There was no point. My voice was calm, controlled, too controlled. I asked him straight up if he was the father of Emily's baby. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. It stretched long enough to confirm what I already knew. Then, in a pathetic attempt to play dumb, he let out this awkward laugh, acting like he had no clue what I was talking about. I wasn't in the mood for games. I told him I had seen everything. Every text, every secret, every disgusting plan they had made behind my back. There was no way out of this. His voice changed immediately. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by panic. He stammered, scrambling for excuses, for anything that could make this situation less damning. He tried to tell me it wasn't supposed to happen like this, as if there was ever a right way to sleep with your brother's wife for a year and plan to pass off your child as his. I let him talk, let him dig his own grave. And then, just when I thought he couldn't make things worse, he dropped the line that nearly made me lose it. He said he loved her. For a second, I actually laughed. Bitter, humorless, exhausted. That was his defense? That he loved her? Like that somehow made it okay? I pressed him, asking what the plan was. Had he intended to let me raise his kid? Had he been waiting for the right moment to swoop in and take over? Was he planning to let me break under the weight of the betrayal so he could step in as the better man? He had no answers. No real ones, anyway. After a long silence, he finally muttered an apology. But it wasn't real. It wasn't for what he had done. He was sorry that he got caught. I told him exactly that. And then I made it clear. We were done. He and Emily deserved each other. They could go live their perfect little life, built on lies and betrayal. But I wanted nothing to do with it. And just like that, he was dead to me. I hung up before he could say anything else. It should have felt like closure, like the end of something. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. Because when my parents found out what had happened, they took Jake's side. For the first time in years, I felt completely alone. My marriage was over. My brother had stabbed me in the back. But the worst part? I still thought, deep down, that my parents would support me. I don't know why I believe that. Maybe because, despite everything, they were still my family. Maybe because some desperate part of me wanted them to finally, for once, choose me. But when I got the call from my mother later that night, I realized just how naive I had been. She sounded tired, like she had spent the entire day dealing with my mess. The first words out of her mouth weren't shock, weren't anger, weren't even concern for me. Instead, she sighed heavily and said, "You need to move on from this." I almost laughed. Move on? From my wife and my brother betraying me? I asked her if she was serious, if she really expected me to just let this go. "You don't understand," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Jake and Emily, they love each other." I felt my whole body go cold. That was what mattered? Their love? Not the fact that my wife had cheated on me. Not the fact that my own brother had been sneaking around behind my back for a year. Not the fact that they had planned to trap me into raising Jake's child. I asked her where she was when I was breaking my back, trying to be a good husband. Where she was when Jake was sneaking into my house, smiling in my face while sleeping with my wife. She dodged the question, repeating the same tired lines. Jake hadn't meant to hurt me. Emily was in a difficult situation. Love was complicated. Then she hit me with the one line that finally broke me. "Jake is family," she said. "You need to forgive him." Something inside me snapped. I asked her, was I not family? Did I not matter at all? But I already knew the answer. I always had. I hung up before she could say anything else. My father texted me later, telling me I was being immature and selfish, that Jake made a mistake, but he was still my brother, that Emily and I were already having problems, so maybe this was for the best. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That was the night I cut them all off. No calls, no texts, no explanations. They had made their choice. Now it was my turn. I won't lie, the first few months were hell. Cutting off my family wasn't just some dramatic decision I made in anger. It was necessary. But that didn't mean it was easy. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, hoping that maybe, one day, they'd finally treat me as an equal to Jake. Now, I had to accept that they never would. I moved out of the house I had shared with Emily. There were too many memories there, and none of them felt real anymore. I found a new place in a different city. Not too far, but far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. Work became my escape. I took on extra projects, worked late nights, poured every ounce of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak into my career. And surprisingly, it paid off. A year later, I got a promotion, a big one. My salary nearly doubled, and suddenly, I wasn't just getting by, I was thriving. I started traveling more, going to the gym, doing things for myself that I had never prioritized before. At first, it felt like I was just going through the motions, but slowly I started to enjoy it. And then, out of nowhere, I met someone. Her name was Hannah. We met at a work event. She was there as a guest of one of my colleagues. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but something about her pulled me in. She was confident, funny, and had this way of making everyone around her feel like they belonged. We started talking, then texting, then seeing each other more and more. It wasn't some whirlwind romance. It was healthy, steady, real. She knew about my past, and she never once made me feel weak for what I had been through. Instead, she told me what my family never did, that I deserved better. And for the first time in my life, I actually started to believe it. It took me 2 years to get here, but I had finally built a life that was completely mine. I was happy. I was successful. I was in love. And then, just when I thought I had finally escaped them, my family came crawling back. For 2 years, I heard nothing from my family. No calls, no texts, no apologies. And honestly, I didn't miss them. I built a new life, one that didn't revolve around chasing after people who never cared about me. I had my career, my own place, a strong group of friends, and Hannah, who was everything Emily never was. She supported me, respected me, and, most importantly, never made me feel like I had to compete for her love. For the first time in my life, I felt free. And then, just when I thought I had finally escaped them, my family came crawling back. It started with a missed call from my mother, then another, then another. I ignored them all. I had nothing left to say to her. But when my father texted me out of nowhere saying, "We need to talk. It's important," I got curious. So I did a little digging. And what I found was hilarious. Turns out, Jake and Emily were struggling. Badly. Jake had lost his job. Apparently, he had coasted by for years on charm and connections, but once he actually had to prove himself, he failed. Meanwhile, Emily had never worked a day in her life and wasn't about to start now. So, with zero income and a baby to support, guess who they turned to? My parents. And guess what? That had backfired too. See, my parents had spent a lot of money helping Jake and Emily. They paid for their wedding, helped them buy a house, covered their bills when things got tight. They bet everything on Jake, assuming he would always land on his feet. But now, they were broke. And suddenly, the son they had abandoned, the one they called selfish and immature, was the only one in the family who was actually successful. So they did what they always did. They called me, expecting me to clean up their mess. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let them stew for a while. I wanted to see how far they go. A few days later, Jake himself called me. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. The moment I picked up, he launched into this awkward, forced small talk, like we were just catching up after not seeing each other for a while, like he hadn't slept with my wife and destroyed my marriage. I let him ramble for a bit, then finally cut him off. "What do you want, Jake?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. He sighed dramatically, like this whole situation was such a burden on him. Then he got to the point. He needed money. I swear, I almost laughed. After everything he had done, he had the nerve to ask me for help? He told me he had made some bad financial decisions and that things were a little tight. He tried to sound casual, as if he wasn't outright begging. Then he actually tried to guilt trip me. He said that no matter what had happened between us, we were still brothers. That family was supposed to help each other out. I could barely believe what I was hearing. This was the same man who had destroyed my marriage, who had let me think I was going to be a father while planning to let me raise his child. And now he wanted my money? I asked him one simple question. Where's Emily? There was a long pause. Then finally, he muttered, She left. I nearly dropped the phone. Emily had left him. The same woman who destroyed my life for him, the same one my parents defended, was gone. She had taken their kid and walked away, leaving Jake with nothing. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. I couldn't even feel bad for him. He deserved this, every single bit of it. I told him no. No, I wouldn't help him. No, I didn't care what happened to him. No, we weren't brothers anymore. Then I hung up, and I thought that was it. But then, a few days later, my parents showed up at my doorstep. They looked different, older, worn down. My mother had dark circles under her eyes, and my father, who had always been so proud, so sure of himself, looked almost embarrassed. For the first time in my life, they weren't acting like they were in control. I let them talk. They told me they had made mistakes, that they regretted taking Jake's side, that they missed me. And then came the real reason they were here. They were in debt, serious debt. Helping Jake had drained their finances, and now they were on the verge of losing everything. They didn't come to apologize. They didn't come because they realized how horribly they had treated me. They came because they needed my money. I stood there for a moment, looking at the people who had spent my entire life making me feel like I was second best. The parents who had let Jake take everything from me, and then asked me to just forgive and forget. I asked them the same question I had asked Jake. Where's Emily? My mother's face twisted in anger. That ungrateful little... I stopped her right there. Oh, so now she's ungrateful? I said, shaking my head. But when she was cheating on me, lying to me, destroying my life, you defended her. You defended both of them. Neither of them said anything. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly. No, I finally said. I don't owe you anything. My mother gasped, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. My father just stared at me, like he didn't recognize me anymore. You turned your back on me when I needed you most, I continued. Now it's my turn. I opened the door wider. Leave. My mother started crying. My father muttered something about how I'd regret this, but I didn't. I never would. As they walked away, I felt lighter. For the first time in my life, I had all the power, and I used it to finally shut the door on them for good. It's been a year since that day. Hannah and I are engaged now. Her family treats me like their own son. I have everything I ever wanted. A loving partner, real support, a future filled with people who actually care about me. And my old family? I haven't heard from them since. Jake lost everything. My parents lost everything. And the best part? None of it is my problem anymore. For once, I won. And I never looked back.